All right. Baroque art. Or, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. It'll make more sense later, trust me. What is it? Well, the Baroque is a cultural revolution and a movement of sorts that focuses on an artistic style that emphasizes the grandeur and very awe of the style itself. This is very reflective in the idea that the word Baroque is derived from the Portuguese word barraco. It means an odd-shaped pearl of sorts. It's also around this time that the Baroque period would be heavily influenced by the Renaissance. A lot of people consider it a more natural evolution of the Renaissance style, considering it carries over many things from the Renaissance, like the use of realism, vibrant colors, and more natural poses and such, and a lot of Christian iconography to really sell these. Except this piece, of course, this is Bacchus, the Roman god of wine. Fun time. And we have another one. His name is lost on me, but I do know this is the patron saint of beer. Yeah. Listen, there's a reason he's the patron saint of beer. I'll explain later. When was it? Of course, the Baroque style appeared sometime after that end of the Renaissance, which was roughly in the early 17th century, so the 1600s, of course, and would last up until roughly the 1740s. Although there were more isolated parts of Europe that would practice it far after the end of the main movement of the Baroque period. It's also well known for having overlapped with the Renaissance, of course, because of their similar styles and existence. Where was it? Of course, the Baroque style itself would receive heavy religious backing from the Catholic Church at this time as a means of a countercultural reformation against the growing divide that the Protestant Reformation offered. And at this time as well, many countries with deep Catholic ties would heavily sponsor the Baroque style, if you would, such as France, Spain, Flanders, and then, well, in southern Italy, of course. But thanks to the popularity of the style itself and the natural way it could be adopted, it would find itself as far as Austria and Germany, considering at the time, Germany wasn't really a country. Of course, we have the fun mess that is the European map in the 1700s. I know, right? The Holy Roman Empire. All right, trivia. Following the end of the Renaissance, there was a period of time in between the end of the Renaissance and the Baroque period. Although it didn't have as many pieces to be called a distinct style itself, it still has a term used for it. That being said, what is the name of this connecting period? It's either a Machiavellian, a Mannerism, a Positional, or a Draconian. Nope. B? Yep. Okay. Famous practitioners. Of course, our first one is Rembrandt Hermanus van Rijn. Of course, Rembrandt, a famous artist, you've probably heard his name. He lived during the Baroque period and is well known for his use of a Dutch style of painting. Although at its basis a largely antithetical practice to that of Baroque, it still shared many elements of the time that really make it a distinctly Baroque piece. Rembrandt was also very interesting in that while he was very successful in his earlier years, he would later die penniless in an unmarked grave until his corpse was later destroyed, as was common with poor people at the time. And here's a piece by him, The Jewish Bride. It's also important to note that the Netherlands at this time had a very high Jewish population. And then, of course, we get to Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, a famous Italian painter of the Baroque period, is well known for his live models and mannerisms, as seen here. He's also well known for being a very nomadic person, if you would, seeing as how he moved all over Naples following his accusation of murder when he killed the man in a street brawl. What can you do? Of course, he would later die of a fever at 38, although many speculate it was either malpractice or poisoning that really killed him. But as you can see here, he was very focused on the consistency of anatomy to whatever degree that would follow. We got another Caravaggio piece. And then we have Peter Paul Rubens, a famous painter and considered one of the most prolific and talented painters of the Baroque piece, especially the Flemish Baroque movement, of course. He emphasized the use of a sensuality and color to his pieces to really sell the item, of course. Along with his illustrations, he would become very well known throughout Europe, although he would later die at the age of 62 from a combination of horse riding accidents and chronic gout. Historical significance. The Baroque movement itself really represents a transitionary period of Europe as we see it move from its dark roots to the Renaissance to a more tame piece with the Baroque period, as it simply more or less acts as an extension of what the Renaissance offered. And of course, it also represents the consistent conflict that the social culture of Europe was developing at this time, considering the Baroque largely got off its feet as a means of a countercultural reformation against Protestants. And of course, with many art styles before it, it drew from many art styles, but it would also serve to influence many art styles later on, such as Impressionism and Realism. And of course, we have some examples here. As you can see, unlike the Renaissance in which it was focused on more Christian iconography and realism, this one definitely falls for grandiose. Especially that one there. And there's our resources. Any questions? You get candy if you ask questions. Yes?
What are the obvious visible differences between the Renaissance style and Baroque style?
Well, the Baroque style was very darker with its color set as well, but it also, depending on the architecture aspect, it was very grandiose and used much more finer materials versus the more mathematically sound construction of the Renaissance period. A lot of the art itself, such as paintings and sculptures and such, there is a hard area to find the actual difference besides color usage and what different cultures brought to the table. Any more? And I just totally dropped a receipt. In terms of expenses, of course, it all depends on the artist as well. If you were to find a Rembrandt piece, it would obviously cost more than probably a Peter Paul Rubens piece, considering name does definitely carry a part of it. But much of the Renaissance pieces themselves, considering the renown of their creators, would probably, on occasion, probably cost more. Although, when they were initially being made, definitely the Baroque would have cost more altogether. But nowadays, the Renaissance pieces definitely have paid off more.
What was the reason that they painted back then if they got no money for it and died poor and young?
Well, besides a hobby, if you weren't exactly good at many other skills, especially for the Baroque period, being a painter and a paint dealer as well served as a very healthy career to bank off of, especially considering the backing the Catholic Church gave it at the time. Although previous major artists such as Leonardo and Michelangelo were not simply just painters by passion, but they were also Renaissance men at heart. Any other questions? Research or putting the actual presentation together? All right, let's see. The research was about 2 hours and making the presentation about 4-ish hours. Listen, he's all the way to the back. Any more questions?
Gentlemen, most of the artwork, tell me if I'm correct, that you find from this period, it's going to be commissioned from the church or from rich families.
Definitely.
So that's how an artist would make their money, is that.
Yeah, it was a largely commission by commission basis.
Yeah.
So your best bet, like Raphael, was to either have an incredibly friendly relationship with the church or, like Michelangelo, just have your skills speak for you despite your well-known hate for your employers.
So is that why a lot of the art from that time is very religious-based?
Well, it's not just that the Catholic Church commissioned a lot of it. It's also considering you create art from what you're inspired by. And considering that at the time, the Bible and many other works similar to it, like Dante's Inferno, are the ones with the most grandiose spectacle to them. There was also a lot of Greek paintings made of major Greek events and Greek myths of such because they considered them such a grandiose tale of exceptionalism. Any more questions? All right.